are such a wide range of putting techniques out there, and there are guys who are really good putting a lot of different ways, and it's understandable because if someone is really dedicated and they do 1,000 putts a day for 8 years, they can have crummy technique and probably actually be really good putters anyways. But I believe there's a correct way to putt, and I think everything else is incorrect. And the way I think of it is, if I was in the Soviet Union 40 years ago and I could spot talent in a 3-year-old kid and yank them from their family and put them in some camp where I built this disc golf machine, I believe there's this one way to putt's correct. Look out, kids! Far! No one's ever died at one of my clinics. And this is what I was telling you earlier. I was going to tell you. The reason I believe it's correct, I don't want anybody to take my word for it. I'm going to explain the theory behind why what I'm saying I think is correct. And if you buy into it, then it's not because I'm telling you, but I think it'll make sense. There's two basic categories of putts. There's the push putt and the spin putt. And the difference is, the push putt is the putt where the shoulder is the hinge, right? This is the putt where generally your elbow and your wrist aren't moving and the shoulder's moving. Ricky Wysocki is coming here. Barry Schultz, here. Ken Climo, here, right? These are all push putts. These are using the shoulder as a hinge. I use Simon Lizotte as an example of the spin putt. Spin putt uses the elbow and the wrist generally for the momentum of the disc. Shoulder doesn't get used a whole lot. It's generally this right here. I believe the spin putt is wrong. I think that the push putt in time will gradually become the putt that all the top players use. I think the spin putt will go the way of the dinosaur, even though there's some good spin putters because they've practiced. The reason for this is the mathematics I was talking about, has to do with vector geometry. If you are putting a spin putt and you're using your wrist to putt, any putt, if you're using your wrist, if you are off by, say, 0.5 centimeter, remember if you release early, you're left, release late, you're to the right, right? Well, with this little tiny hinge right here, if you're off, say, it's like 0.5 centimeter, like 1/4 of an inch, on your release point right here, that little 1/4 of an inch, with this little tiny hinge right here, by the time that this gets up to a basket, the range that 1/4 inch will create is huge, right? This is like the theory behind, like, if an asteroid is heading towards Earth. If it's far enough away and you just touch it a tiny bit, that little bit of change of direction, if it travels far enough, is going to make a huge difference. With a spin putt, that tiny little bit right there off will make that big of a difference. You got to be so much more precise with that putt. With a push putt, and the way I'm going to be showing you, is that this, the whole time using your shoulder as a hinge, is going to be going towards the basket. So if you release 1/4 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch early or late with the disc traveling towards the basket, it's almost going to make no difference at all. So that 1/4 of an inch error on a push putt is still going to go where you're aiming. 1/4 of an inch error on the spin putt is going to miss. So you have to be far more precise with the spin putt. I believe because of this, the spin putt is wrong. I think it's wrong. I was a spin putter for like 25 years. And the whole time I was touring, I was a spin putter. And I was a pretty good player. I took 13 years off, took a lesson from Jay Redding, started push putting, and within a week, I was a better putter than I was when I was playing for a living. Not because I got better, but because the technique was the correct technique, and my technique was wrong. So I'm guilty of it, but I believe spin putting is wrong. So that's kind of going off here, but I believe push putt's right. I won't even mention the spin putt again. So with the push putt, so here's what we're going to do. First thing you want to do is you want to grip with a fan grip, and you want to grip, what's important is you want to grip with the underside edge of the disc between the end of your finger and your first knuckle. What's important is that you want to give it this pivot point right here, underneath here. That's because with a push putt, you don't spin the disc. The disc is going to spin, but you're not going to spin it. The spin of the putt is not going to come from you spinning it, but instead, it's going to come from your hand coming to an abrupt stop. And when your hand comes to a stop, the disc is going to leave your hand, and because it has this pivot point, it's going to rotate off that pivot point, and that's where the spin is going to come from. So it'll spin off your finger here without you spinning it. So that's where the spin's going to come from. The stance, and I'm going to keep coming back to the same idea like the darts analogy. Everything we're going to do is going to be towards your target, away from the target, and towards the target. This is what Jay Redding hammered home to me that helps so much. Anything that involves rotation on a putt gives you the opportunity to miss right and miss left. If instead you're forward and you're going towards the target, you're taking the right and left out of the equation. It doesn't mean you're not going to miss right or left, but you're narrowing the gap which you can miss towards. If you notice with like anybody that spin putts, getting the height is not the difficult part. It's the right and left. If your disc is traveling on this plane, right and left is gone. So we're going to take that out of the equation. Everything's going to be facing forward. Your stance, and again, this is where Jay kind of just slapped me upside the head. I used to teach that you wanted to have a wide stance when you putted. When I did these clinics I taught like 155 clinics wrong. but I was the first guy to do it, so I didn't know any better. But I told Jay, I said, Jay, if you have a narrow stance, I said your balance is really poor. Someone could just walk up to you literally and push you, and you would tip over. I said you have much better balance with a wider stance. And Jay says you're absolutely right, but you'll make more putts with a narrow stance. So what do you care about your balance? And I went, that makes sense. Not that balance isn't important, but he says you sacrifice some balance. The reason why is because you want to be able to have forward momentum with your body. If we take it to the extreme to a straddle putt, there's almost no forward momentum with your body. You can't go forward and backwards on a straddle putt. The further you move your foot back, the more forward and back, up to the point, and the way he described it was a track and field athlete who's trying to generate immediate forward momentum. Your feet are a normal stance apart, slide your foot back. That gives you the most backwards and forward towards the target. So sacrifice a little bit of balance, put your feet in a place where you can come forward. You don't want to take your foot behind here because then you're not able to go forward and you're also having to rotate. So take your foot out, regular stance back forward. You want to square everything towards the target. So the way I heard, I can't forget her name, the world women's champion for like 3 years ago, I went to one of her clinics. I feel like I'm blanking on it. But she said you have two sets of eyes, two sets of eyes, two sets of eyes, put them all on the target. I thought that made perfect sense. So hips, shoulders, head towards your target. Face everything forward. Set the disc up at the point of release. Now, you want to putt generally flat. The reason you want to putt flat is because if you putt flat, you have to correctly aim to get in the basket, right? That's hard to do. But if you putt at any type of angle or nose down, you got to do two things correctly. You have to correctly aim to an imaginary spot that's not the basket, and you have to estimate when it's going to run out of spin, when it's going to fade, when it's going to curve back, how much it's going to curve back, how much the wind's going to affect it. You have to do two things correctly. If you putt flat, you only have to do one thing correctly, and that one thing's already hard enough. So, putt flat, and you can hold it. Putt with a slight hyzer, it's still going to fly straight. I would be critical of that, but you don't want to be putting with any significant angle. So, a little bit of angle is okay, but generally flat. What you want to do is you want to set the disc up in front of you, and then from here, it's 1, 2, 3, right? Set the disc at the point of release, 1, 2, 3. Your body is forward, 1, 2, 3. And they correspond. So it's 1, 2, 3. And that's all you want to do. You want to release it. Now, if your disc is coming across at an angle, like if it say it's having a hyzer angle, you're not going to be using your wrist or elbow on the putt, remember? But you will use the wrist to set the angle of the disc. So if you're putting across at an angle, take your wrist, rotate your wrist until the disc is going to come out flat, lock your wrist in place. That's where the throw is going to be. If you're putting nose down, adjust your wrist. You're going to use your wrist to get the disc at the right angle, but then lock it in place again. Then from there, it's 1, 2, 3. I kind of skipped one thing. If you're comfortable with your elbow being bent, that's okay, but it's going to stay locked in place. Paul McBeth putts with his angle bent a little bit. It's hard to question, but he's not doing this. His elbow's bent, but then from there, it's generally staying in this straight line or staying in that angle. One of the things that I read. studying focus in sports, like how to focus. You know, the idea of like, you know, like a golfer who lines up to the ball, how long do you stand there? How much do you try to get comfortable? How many times should you take the practice? Like, and they're trying to quantify this. And they use darts as one of the examples. They use archery, golf, some other sports. And they did is they took a bunch of top athletes and they had them focus in different ways across many, many different trials and gather data to see what amount of focus was correct. For instance, if you were playing darts and you just stepped up like this, your aim's not gonna be that good. But if you step here and you sit it for 30 seconds, your focus will come in and your focus will come out, right? You're not gonna be as accurate. So the question was how long should you be lining up and everything? And what the article found is even though there were spikes of individuals, you know, around there, generally it was 2 seconds. As the amount of time the players would line up. If you're archery, you'd go 1, 2, let go. That was the amount of time that was the most effective amongst the largest number of people. As soon as I incorporated that into my putting technique, my putting got better. So now what I try to do is I try to step up to a putt, and I step up. I'm getting my stance. I'm not counting this, but once I step up and I land my putt, 1, 2, and then fire. Any longer than that, it tends to have the focus leave you. Any quicker than that's rushing. What it didn't mention in the article, and I think this has something to do with it, is that's generally how we all practice, right? Someone with a 20-second routine of, you know, lining up for their putt, when they're practicing, they step up and putt. No one does their 20-second routine, and you do far more putts in practice than in a round, right? So I think what that 2-second rule does, it emulates what we do in practice, which is we step up, we line up, we putt, and that I found to be very effective. The final thing, I skipped this. The follow through on the putt should always be towards the basket and in front of where you're going. If I was putting here and the disc is going from here and I'm releasing it here, my follow through should be there. It should continue exactly the direction of the target. So the follow through on a putt should never be this, should never be that, should never be that. It's out, it's in front of you, and it should stay in front of you. I like to actually leave it there on purpose a little bit longer. I think of like guys in basketball that it seems like they're just showing off when they do this and they kind of like keep their hands there. But I actually think there's something to that, right? Because I try to do that with the putts. Where I putt, I leave my hand here just for a second, but to remind myself that I'm not over here. I'm here, the hand's right in front. Usually the putt goes where the hand went though. Any questions on?
Where are you getting the power from? That's what I was talking about.
The power comes from the speed from here. How fast can you get from here to here, and then how quickly you can stop. I should point out, I said spin putts. Push putts only work to a certain distance. At a certain distance, you can't get to the basket without putting some wrist on it. So at some point, you are going to have to put the wrist into it. When you first start doing a push putt, your range is going to be about 12 feet. I mean, and it's going to be like a wounded duck. But it's going to, if you just keep doing it, your range will get further and further. Any distance where you can reach the basket with a push putt, you want to push putt. If you can't, you can spin it. But I like, I probably spin putted about 50 feet or 60 feet, but at that point I don't expect to ever make a putt. So by the time I'm doing this, even though they go in once in a while, that's not the game. Putting's, you know, people say this, but it's totally true, even at the highest level. Putting's about making all your putts inside the circle. It's not about making 50-footers. So if you're making all your putts from me to you, you're gonna win most tournaments you play, or, you know, be competitive for sure. So usually push putt. Most people can get push putt up to that circle range for sure.
So jump putting, you like the jump putt pretty much?
Yeah. In my opinion, a jump putt is a falling putt. You guys all play tournaments, but if you're outside 10 meters, that's right. If you're inside 10 meters when you putt, you have to establish balance behind where your putt is, right? If you putt and then fall through and touch the ground in front of you, that's a falling putt. That's a violation.
Yeah, I was going to ask that back foot. Is it almost like in soccer when you throw in, where you keep that back foot to kind of, or you keep that toe on the ground?
No. The foot will come up on the putt.
Okay.
Because that's a counterbalance. But I never think about it because I think it happens naturally. So I think that when we do this, what happens to your back foot? If you're thinking about it, you're probably thinking about the wrong thing. Because if you're putting and you're not falling, your back foot is doing it right, generally, I think. But what I think a jump putt is I don't believe it's a actual jump. I believe a proper jump putt is just a falling putt. So if I'm putting from me to you, I can get enough momentum with my arm to stay behind it. But at a certain distance, I can't get to the target just with my arm, so I have to throw and then I fall forward. I think that's the correct jump putt. I've seen players, I'll demonstrate one. I've seen players do a jump putt that looks like this. I think that's weird. Honestly, I think that's almost like putting left foot forward. It seems wrong to me. To me, a jump putt is a putt where your momentum just carries forward afterwards. You're just not establishing balance. I do that at some point. I like to jump putt. My approach is inside about 120 feet. I like to jump putt 140 feet maybe.
Wow.
But that's because of I'm not a very good finesse player. So I'm compensating for a poor skill level. Not saying I recommend doing that, but that's what I do. Any other questions? Okay, so I should say two things real quick. So I make frisbees, and I have them for sale. It's called Fly High Discs, and I think they're really good. And that's what I gotta say. I'm not a good pitch man. You guys gonna play doubles? Doubles is $12 a piece. It's for prizes. The idea of the clinic series is to get my discs in people's hands, so we'll give 100% payback in prizes, which will be Fly High discs. And what I like to do is I want to break it up into an A pool and a B pool, so two pros don't get paired up, two new players don't get paired up. That way everybody's going to be competitive. Is there anybody here that kind of knows most of the people that can help?
I mean,
Can I nominate? Can I nominate you to help?
Yeah, I'll help.
Okay. Well, we'll just when you sign up, just say if you're like A pool is like a pro, B pool is non-pro, and then once we have our first list, then we'll just move some people over just to kind of get it balanced. But like I said, I want it to be competitive. But that's it. So thanks for coming out.
Nope.
I talked a lot, but anyway.